There are things your mind may try to reject, yet your body will never be dishonest about them. You sit quietly, convincing yourself that it has ended, that the chapter is finished, that the story has already reached its final page. And still, somewhere inside you, there remains a faint tension that refuses to fade away. A sensation that does not align with your reasoning. A knowing that does not arise from thought, but from something deeper, older, and far more silent. Because the body does not interpret endings in the same way the mind likes to pretend. It holds on, it recalls. The idea that the psyche recognizes patterns before the mind fully understands them comes from the layered nature of human perception. What you consciously identify as your mind is only the surface of a much deeper structure. Beneath it operates an expansive network of instinct, emotion, memory, and bodily awareness that constantly processes information without waiting for logical explanation. This deeper layer is not slow or uncertain the way conscious reasoning often is. It is immediate, associative, and symbolic. It does not wait for language to define things. It reacts to patterns, emotional tones, and familiar signatures. When someone enters your life, your conscious mind tends to evaluate them gradually. It asks questions, compares details, builds narratives, and tries to determine meaning. But your body and your unconscious perception do not wait for that process to conclude. They begin interpreting micro-signals instantly. Tone of voice, rhythm of speech, emotional presence, facial expressions, pauses, even subtle inconsistencies in behavior are all registered beneath awareness. These are not processed through words. They are experienced as shifts in your internal state. Comfort, tension, attraction, resistance, familiarity, or unease often arise before you can explain why. This is because the human nervous system is designed for survival through pattern recognition, not abstract thinking. Long before language ever existed, perception depended on rapid interpretation of environments and people. So the body developed a system that detects emotional safety or threat through repetition and similarity. When something mirrors a past emotional experience, especially one that was intense, the body reacts as though the past is happening again. Not because it is mistaken, but because it is efficient. It chooses recognition over repeated analysis. This is why you can encounter someone and instantly feel that you recognize their type or sense something familiar about them without being able to explain it. That familiarity is not always about the individual themselves, but about the emotional pattern they activate within you. They may remind your system of comfort, loss, abandonment, excitement, or unpredictability. These patterns are not stored only as thoughts or images in memory. They exist as physiological states. Your heartbeat, breathing patterns, muscle tension, and hormonal responses all carry traces of past emotional experiences. So, when a new situation resembles an older emotional structure, the body responds first. It generates a feeling before thought arrives. The mind then attempts to explain that feeling afterward, often constructing narratives that may or may not be accurate. This is why people sometimes develop feelings for someone before they truly understand them, or feel uneasy around someone without any clear justification. The explanation comes later, but the reaction happens instantly. This also sheds light on what people call intuition in relationships. Intuition is often the unconscious mind recognizing subtle patterns that the conscious mind has not yet processed. It is not a mystical ability. It is rapid pattern recognition based on accumulated experience. The body notices continuity and repetition where the thinking mind only sees fragments. It senses when something aligns with an old emotional template or disrupts it. Because of this, emotional connections can feel more powerful than logic. When someone activates a deep pattern within you, the response is not only psychological, but also physical. The body begins to orient itself around that person's presence or absence. Even after separation, the nervous system may continue behaving as if the pattern is still active. This is why memories can feel alive within the body, why certain thoughts create physical sensations, and why emotional attachment does not simply switch off when circumstances change. The mind may insist that something is over, yet the body may still be processing it. This creates a sense that something remains unfinished, as if the system is still waiting for closure. Not because it can predict the future, but because it is still aligned with a previous pattern that has not fully dissolved. Over time, if no new experience replaces or resolves it, the system continues referencing the same emotional blueprint, which can feel like anticipation or expectation. So when it is said that the psyche recognizes patterns before the mind understands them, it points to this layered design of human perception. The deepest layer reacts first, the emotional layer interprets next, and the rational mind explains last. What you call knowing is often the body arriving at recognition before language can catch up. And what you call thinking is often just the mind translating something that has already been felt long before it became a thought. Emotional memory existing within the nervous system means that experiences are not only stored as thoughts or images in the brain, but also as physical and biological patterns in the body. When something deeply emotional occurs, especially within relationships, the brain does not process it like ordinary information. It involves the limbic system, the autonomic nervous system, and hormonal responses that together encode the experience into the body's overall state. This is why certain memories do not feel like distant events, but like present sensations that can be instantly reactivated when triggered. When you experience an emotionally intense connection, your body adapts to that person. Your heart rhythm, your breathing patterns, your stress levels, and even your baseline emotional state begin to synchronize with the environment created by that relationship. If the connection was comforting, your body learns calmness in their presence. If it was uncertain or emotionally intense, your body learns alertness, anticipation, and fluctuation. These adaptations are not symbolic. They are biological. The nervous system literally reshapes itself to match the emotional reality it repeatedly experiences. This is why separation from someone does not only feel like losing a person, but like losing a state of being. The body does not immediately erase the patterns it has learned. It continues functioning within the same emotional configuration for some time, as if the original stimulus might return. This is not imagination. It is biological momentum. The nervous system is designed to maintain continuity because abrupt changes in emotional regulation can feel destabilizing. So it holds on to the last known emotional settings until new patterns are formed through repetition and time. This is also why reminders of a person can feel physical rather than purely mental. A song, a scent, a location, or even a similar tone of voice can trigger a full body reaction. The body responds before you consciously recognize what has been activated. Your heart rate may shift, your stomach may tighten, your breathing may change, or a sudden emotional wave may rise without a clear thought attached to it. These reactions are not created by memory in an intellectual sense, but by stored physiological associations. The nervous system remembers how it felt to exist in that emotional state and recreates it instantly when a similar pattern appears. This storage of emotional experience is not random. It is part of how humans survive and connect relationally. Early attachment experiences, especially during childhood, shape the baseline of emotional regulation. The nervous system learns what safety feels like through caregivers and early bonds. Later relationships often build upon or challenge these foundational patterns. So when a strong emotional bond forms in adulthood, it can either reinforce or reshape earlier settings, creating even deeper imprints. Because of this, emotional memory is not linear. It does not remain neatly in the past. It behaves more like an active system that can be reawakened at any moment. This is why people sometimes feel as though they have returned to a previous time emotionally when something reminds them of a past relationship. Even if logically they understand they are in a different place and time, their body responds as if the original emotional environment has come back again. The nervous system does not clearly separate the past from the present in the same way the thinking mind tends to. It reacts primarily to patterns of activation rather than to timelines. This is also why healing from emotional experiences is not only about understanding them on an intellectual level. You can completely understand why something ended, why someone acted in a certain way, or why a relationship was not aligned with you, and still feel emotionally connected or reactive to it. That happens because understanding takes place in the neocortex, while emotional memory is stored and activated in deeper subcortical regions and within the body itself. These deeper systems do not update immediately through logic or reasoning. They gradually change through new emotional experiences that slowly reshape the patterns already stored. So when people say they cannot let go, it is often not because they are choosing to hold on mentally, but because their nervous system has not yet rewritten the emotional coding of that connection. The body still anticipates certain patterns, still expects familiar emotional rhythms, and still responds as if the bond exists in some way. This creates a sensation of emotional residue, as though something is still there even in its absence. Over time, if no new reinforcing triggers appear, these patterns slowly begin to weaken. The nervous system is flexible and capable of change, but it requires consistent new input in order to reorganize. Until that shift takes place, emotional memory continues to live as an active imprint, shaping perception, reactions, and internal states long after the original event has passed. Unfinished emotional experiences tend to create repetition because the human mind and nervous system are naturally oriented toward completion. When something emotionally meaningful occurs and does not reach a clear resolution, the psyche does not treat it as something finished. Instead, it holds it as an open loop. An open loop is a psychological condition in which emotional energy, attention, and meaning remain tied to an experience that has not been fully processed or integrated. This creates a kind of internal pressure that seeks resolution not only through logic but also through repetition, imagination, memory, and emotional reactivation. When a relationship ends without closure, when feelings remain unspoken, or when the emotional meaning of an experience is too intense to fully process at the time, the mind does not simply archive it as something in the past. It continues to organize around it. This happens because the psyche is designed to maintain coherence. It wants experiences to form a complete and understandable structure. If something ends suddenly or remains unclear, the system continues to generate internal scenarios in an effort to fill in the missing pieces. This is why people often replay conversations, imagine different outcomes, or mentally reconstruct events long after they have ended. These repetitions are not random or meaningless. They are attempts by the unconscious mind to resolve emotional tension. The mind revisits the same emotional territory repeatedly because it is searching for a version of the experience that feels complete, understood, or emotionally settled. At the same time, the unconscious mind does not clearly distinguish between memory and imagination when it comes to emotional processing. When you replay an event mentally, your body often responds as if it is happening again in real time. This is why thinking about someone from the past can still create physical sensations, emotional waves, or noticeable shifts in mood. The repetition is not only cognitive, it is embodied. Each time the experience is replayed, it strengthens the emotional pathway connected to it, making it more familiar and easier for the nervous system to access. This creates a cycle. The more unresolved something remains, the more the mind returns to it. The more it returns, the more emotionally active it becomes. And the more emotionally active it becomes, the more important and significant it begins to feel, even if logically you know it belongs to the past. This is how unfinished experiences gain psychological weight over time. They do not stay as static memories. They evolve into active internal patterns that influence perception and emotional responses. There is also a deeper layer within this repetition. The psyche does not only attempt to understand what happened, it also tries to restore balance. When an emotional experience disrupts your internal sense of identity, attachment, or meaning, the mind attempts to re-establish equilibrium by re-engaging with the source of that disruption. This is why people are sometimes drawn back towards situations or emotional states that they consciously recognize are not good for them. It is not simply desire, it is an attempt to resolve imbalance. Unfinished emotional experiences also shape expectations in subtle ways. If a connection ends without clarity, the mind may continue to hold an unconscious expectation that it will eventually resolve. This expectation does not always appear as obvious hope. It can exist as a quiet emotional orientation toward the future, a feeling that something is still incomplete. This orientation then influences how new experiences are interpreted. New people may be unconsciously compared to the unresolved person, and new situations may be filtered through the lens of the unfinished experience. Dreams often become a space where this repetition becomes especially visible. In dreams, the unconscious mind is not limited by logical structure, so it often recreates emotional scenarios that reflect unresolved material. People from the past may appear, conversations may replay, or symbolic versions of the experience may unfold. These are not predictions or literal messages, but rather expressions of the psyche attempting to process and integrate unfinished emotional content. Repetition can also show up as emotional patterns rather than specific memories. A person may find themselves entering similar types of relationships, facing familiar emotional dynamics, or experiencing recurring feelings with different individuals. This is not simply coincidence on the surface level, but the result of unresolved internal patterns seeking resolution through variation. The psyche tends to recreate familiar emotional structures in different external forms until the underlying pattern is either understood or transformed. What makes unfinished experiences so persistent is that emotional resolution is not achieved through time alone. Time may reduce intensity, but it does not automatically create integration. Integration requires awareness, reflection, emotional processing, and often new experiences that provide a different outcome. Without these elements, the original emotional loop remains partially active, continuing to shape inner experience. So repetition is not a failure to let go. It is the psyche's way of trying to complete what was left unfinished. It is a natural process of psychological continuity where the mind keeps returning to what was not fully understood, not fully expressed, or not fully resolved until it either finds closure or gradually transforms through new internal organization. Projection causes absence to feel like presence because the human mind does not experience people only as external individuals, but also as internal psychological representations shaped by emotion, memory, and expectation. When someone becomes emotionally significant, they do not remain only in the outside world. They become partially embedded within your inner world as a living image. This internal version continues to exist even when the physical person is no longer present. And it is this inner representation that often creates the sensation that they are still close, still active, still emotionally present in your life. Projection occurs when the mind takes its own internal content, such as desires, fears, hopes, unresolved emotions, or unmet needs, and places them onto another person. In close relationships, especially those with emotional intensity, this process becomes stronger. You are not only responding to who the person objectively is, but also to what they represent within your inner world. They become a symbol of emotional experiences such as safety, excitement, validation, rejection, longing, or transformation. Once this symbolic layer forms, it does not disappear easily when the person leaves. So when the physical presence is gone, the inner representation remains active. The mind continues to interact with it automatically. You may find yourself thinking about the person without intending to, imagining how they would respond to something, or feeling their presence during emotional moments. This does not mean the person is influencing you from a distance, but rather that your psyche is still engaging with the internal image that was created through repeated emotional interaction. The absence in external reality does not immediately remove the presence within the inner world. Instead, that inner presence continues to operate, shaping thoughts, emotions, and reactions until it is gradually integrated, transformed, or replaced through new experiences and updated emotional patterns.